Thank you, Cornelius. Good morning, everyone. It's time for climate action. I think it's a topic for DII today and for the COP28 in general. I think by any means we mean by that if we just talk about action, we will fail. So I think what is at stake now, as was mentioned by His Excellency Sharifi Al-Olama, is to walk the talk. And to walk the talk, actually, one way to achieve it is to gather the three forces that were mentioned by His Excellency Mohieldin: industry, technology, regulators, and investors, all together joining forces in order to make things happen in a practical and tangible way. Let us just look at where we stand right now. There is a global heating happening, and we need action now. If we look back at the World Hydrogen Energy Outlook figures of where we standed back in 2015 when there was a COP21 in the Paris Agreements, oil was the main source of investments into the energy system. What has changed 8 years later is that it's no longer oil the first place where investments are going. The low emissions power are now the first. However, are we moving at a sufficiently high speed? I think Marco was referring to speed as one of the fourth pillar of this trilemma, that is now the fourth one. Well, in fact, 30% of the investments have been, the increase of the investments have increased by 30% over this period. That is actually, over an 8-year period, an increase of 3% per annum. It is far too slow. So we need to move at a faster pace. The figure I want to highlight here is that actually it's 4 trillion of investments that need to be delivered every year to reach, by 2030, to reach the net zero targets. 4 trillion is actually a factor of 5 versus the amount of current energy transition-related investments that are currently being deployed. This means that we need to actually have a speed of deployment of investments that is growing by 30% per annum by 2030. So it's 10 times faster than what we have observed over the past 7 years in comparison. So it is a major challenge. How can we do it? And is it really actually possible at all? I think we should pay tribute to the efforts and the endeavors of the MENA region, which are absolutely impressive in this respect. Actually, the slide, I'm calling it Fast-Growing Renewable Energy, MENA, but I almost called it MENA Mashallah, because really, in fact, the level of investments that have been deployed into the renewable energy space have been impressive in a short amount of time, and the ambition to deploy that money going forward is also very impressive. It is currently 220 billion that have been invested into the renewable energy infrastructure, but the ambition is to bring that to 400 billion, and I'm just talking here about the Middle East figures. But as a whole for MENA, there are many developers that have been very active into developing a renewable energy infrastructure. Masdar, of course, here in the UAE, Aqua Power, Nareva in the Morocco, and many other players in the MENA region have been extremely active and are transforming their economies as we speak. So I think, actually, MENA is showing us that we can have a switch from an energy security leader to an energy transition champion. And this can be happening with ambition, speed, and of course, the appropriate natural resources. But this renewable energy sector that is being created will not be able to achieve its goals if it's just not connected with the rest of the world and the consumption centers. Hydrogen is the vector that is enabling us to connect the production centers here in those deserts that Paul was mentioning earlier, which help us to produce astounding amounts of energy to the consumption centers in Europe or in Asia or in other places in the world. So with hydrogen, we can achieve a lot. And as Cornelius was referring, with Hy24, we have created a fund that is aiming to walk the talk of deploying the hydrogen economy in terms of investments. We have raised 2 billion in 18 months, and the fund was actually is like really close to being closed really this year at a 2 billion mark. But with 2 billion, we can actually deploy 20 billion of capex, thanks to subsidies and thanks to debt and the co-investments that we can gather alongside us. And this will generate a spillover effect all over the economy in terms of every little dot here that you see corresponds to a segment of the hydrogen system that can be achieved with that, each 1 billion box. It represents 500 tons of hydrogen per year. It represents 1,000 stations of hydrogen refueling. It represents 20,000 fuel cell trucks. So with each of these little bubbles, we can actually develop a full economy. And 20 billion is not a negligible figure if you put it in relation to the overall investment universe that has been identified for hydrogen, which is a 300 billion universe that has been highlighted by the Hydrogen Council as being the need for the investments to happen by 2030. And also the fact that beyond the infrastructure that needs to be invested and produced and put in place, there is another 200 billion that needs to be invested into all the equipments to make it happen. The electrolyzers, the storage, the fuel cells, and all the equipments, which are the shovels of this economy. How can we make it happen in a practical way? How can we make it more tangible? The bet we have taken and the stance we have taken is to move very fast into making investments into 7 investments in a short amount of time, in 18 months. All these developers have actually developed projects which represent, and this is not a public figure, but I can quote it here in this forum, 12 gigawatts of feasibility stage projects. It's a big amount with just these 7 investments. There are 700 megawatts that are currently being under construction with those 7 investments. And 23 megawatts are already in operation. It's a small figure, but it's going to be 700 megawatts in a few months. So we're moving fast, and actually the demonstration here is that if you're investing into a fund, the leverage effect is enormous. With someone putting 20 million in this fund, actually they can have a 1,000 times effect on the investments they can do, reaching 20 billion. So it is actually a very strong and powerful means of deploying money into the hydrogen economy, but also in the climate action at large. To finish, I would like to use this opportunity that we are close to COP28 to bring coherence. It starts with projects. Industrial projects at large scale to produce sustainable energy at the cheapest possible cost is the starting point. But to make it feasible, what are the 2 key enablers in our view? One of them is to set appropriate emissions certification standards. And the objective for this is to enable that when we have a low CO2 carrier, this can be compared with other low CO2 carriers, and it's easy to compare, and the rule is the same for everyone. It's very important for export projects in particular, which is the key here. The second one is to have a form of climate label to channel investments. We need investors, institutional investors, and sovereign wealth funds and pension funds to have a label that enables them to make it easier for them to allocate money to the climate sphere and to the energy transition. Because it's a difficult sphere. The risk return is not the same. So if you have a climate label, it makes it easier. And finally, once we have these ingredients together, then we can co-invest. And in here, I'm making a call for co-investment. We will need to deploy the money together. We have a fund available for that. And I'm looking forward to do things with you together in a coherent way. Thank you very much.